Now the other candidate who speaks of love, and she's going to win on the field of love with Trump. That's how she's going to win the election. Well, recently, I assume many of you have seen this, where she's in a church, and it's a spot the pews are not filled very much, even though she's Oprah's guru, spiritual advisor. She needs a lot of spiritual advice since she funneled all these, or served up all these young Hollywood starlet wannabes to Weinstein, and also she's connected to Epstein. So she's in this church, 2016, and she wants the white people to apologize to the African American people because of slavery. And notice how she calls the African Americans, which are two proper names, two countries, two proper names. Well, they're descendants, people from Africa, and they've been in America longer than most of us have, so they're Americans. But the white people, you're just white people. You just put them all together. You're not, they're not individuals. They're just white people. It doesn't matter what country or what religion you are. You're just white people. You're all, because you have a low melanin count, you're guilty of everything. So she's saying, repeat after me, because she is the modern day prophet, they call her. Repeat after me. And she made them repeat her words, which kind of sounds very communistic, because you got your room full of, there's the communist leader, there's the dictator, and you have to be brainwashed and you repeat whatever they're saying you're guilty of, whether you are or not. You're being made, and if you don't do it, you're a racist. You see, they had to do this, or else they were racist. Most of these people probably didn't have ancestors or were even in this country when slavery was going on. However, they might be Democrats. And it was the Democrat Party that did all this funny business, that did all these atrocities. They're the ones. Okay, so they had to apologize for a sin they never committed, the sin they don't want. Many of these people probably grew up and lived their lives trying to be kind and nice and befriend Black people and seeing them as equal, loving their culture, loving the arts that they've produced, admiring their athletic abilities and their intelligence. Physicists, there's a lot of African Americans that are physicists, admiring their intelligence, being the benefit of what they've offered. And it's quite possible the white people do have a history of slavery, of being enslaved. And the thing that bothers me the most is that Marianne Williamson is completely ignorant. She wants to be president. Either she's lying and she wants to keep the narrative going and keep the white people in their place by putting the white people in their place, then it deflects from her. Clearly she's not the racist, even though she's white. Clearly, she's not the racist one, and she's not guilty of any of these things, and she's not apologizing. It's just these other white people. See, that's like Cortez and SJWs. You deflect from the fact that you're white, and you call racist first, so nobody points to you. It's what the Democrat Party does. But the Democrat Party, you know they're still guilty of this sin of slavery. And if you start with what's going on today, by keeping the border open, human trafficking, sex trafficking people, a permanent serf class coming into the country, but you've got the government, you've got us taxpayers to supplement that. So you Democrats who've got all your money and you Republicans want a serf class that you only pay a quarter of the wage to. We pay the rest. And there's no workers' comp, there's no unemployment, and there's no money paid into Social Security. But that's okay, because the American taxpayer will cover it. You see how that's, clearly they're not racist, because if you're, they want the open border. And that wanting the open border clearly means you're not racist. And kind of deflects from the fact that they actually are, and they're actually using these people, and they're using people for their vote. But notice how she's actually a Jewish, born of Jewish parents. And I think to myself, what if one of those white people in that room was actually a survival of the Holocaust, and she didn't know it, and she told them to stand up and apologize, or their family had died in Auschwitz, and she made them stand up and apologize. That would be bad, wouldn't it? What about these other white people? What about the history of the white people? We just take Europe. Let's see. Starting with England. England starves the Irish. They starve the Irish to death. Many of them die. Millions die. Then they take the men, and then they sell them as indentured servants. These indentured servants are sold for 5 silver coins. While it's a deal, it's a great deal, because an African slave costs 50 silver coins. So the African slave was treated differently. They were fed better. And if you were filling the hull of a boat, you put the white people in the hull, and the slaves from Africa throw the stuff into the hole for the white people to catch. Because you'd rather have the white person die, because first of all, they're malnutrition. They're really not going to live that much longer, and you didn't pay much for them. So it's okay if they die. So then the English said, oh, we've got all these women and children left, and they sold them to slaves. England has a history of getting rid of an underclass. They also expelled the Jews. And they found this well, archaeological discovery, this well in England that had Jewish people upside down thrown into the well, women and children. Men, women, and children thrown upside down in a well. They don't have a good history of treating their people. And see, their underclass, they didn't like the even though the underclass was white, just like them, and they were probably genetically similar, right? They're the same race. But they didn't like the underclass. They were poor, and the poor are sick, and they've got a lot of diseases. So anytime any of them did the slightest mistake, stole nothing, basically, they were hung. You stole a piece of bread, literally, you were hung for that. It's a death penalty for everything. And then they realized, well, we could sell the underclass to the colonies too. There's a woman who stole, it's written, Ancestry dug it up. She stole a hand trowel because she was poor and she wanted to grow vegetables. And she was sold to the colonies as a slave, 5 silver coins. So this is what they did. And see, white people were really bad to other white people. It didn't do the color. They came over, and farmers came over to South America, and they killed any of the native people who were poaching their animals. And SJWs, Democrats will tell you, they did it because of them being the color of their skin, their race. No, it's the same law that they applied to all the white people in Europe. Any poor person, as long as you're poor, if you're rich, you got away with it. If you were poor and you poached, you stole an animal because you were hungry, you were killed. So the same punishment applied, so it's not race. So you gotta get rid of that from your head immediately. Not race. And wealthy white people had this, there was like a cellar, and they had this big iron cover that they moved across, round cover they moved across. And in the bottom were these spikes. And when they could get rid of someone who did the slightest thing wrong anytime they wanted to. White people, but they were just poor. You throw them through this hole. It's like it was called the hole of hell, except it was in French. They called the name was in French. You throw them down there, they land on the spikes, and you land on a bunch of other dead people who were thrown down on these spikes that have been decaying. And then you put the lid over, the heavy iron lid over, so you don't hear the screams, because that would ruin your day, So these white people did these things to other white people. And of course, there's the Slavs. That's where we got the word slave from. The most enslaved people in the world are the Slavs, enslaved by other white people, and also people from Asia came over and enslaved the Slavs. Everybody did. But that's okay because they're white, but they're the most enslaved people in history. Now, in Africa, there's been slavery since the dawn of time. One tribe goes to war with the other tribe. And what they did was they realized that you bring this tribe, what they do is they bring the whole tribe to the coast, and they wanted guns. That way they can more effectively win the war, And they could get more stuff that Africa wasn't producing. So they would bring this entire tribe. So it isn't like there's any family left over. I remember somebody left this message. That's what the family is that these slaves were taken, people were taken from in Africa. That's what needs to be addressed. Reparations to the families. The entire tribe went. There wasn't any family left. It was few and far between. And 160 years ago, it was 300 years. So we're actually talking like a long time ago. Talking a long time ago, hundreds of years ago. Do they know? Do they remember? Do they have a history of their ancestors that were taken as slaves? If there are any left, but what they did was they took the entire tribe, brought them to the coast, and trade anything that they wanted, usually guns. Anything they wanted, the Western world was making. People of Africa wanted. The winners of the war wanted. Now, right now, tribes are warring on other tribes, completely committing genocide, wiping out the entire tribe altogether. Because now in the Western world, slavery is punishable by death. You see, we had it for about 300 years. And then they ended it, and it's punishable by death. And America fought a war against each other to end it. Nearly 700,000 people died. And if you think, a lot of people say, oh, no, it was for something else. It wasn't for slavery originally. It's several years in, then it changed to slavery. No, it actually was. Because if you read all the documents, the people who appear on the floor of the Congress and the Senate from the South said explicitly in every single speech it was about slavery. They wanted to keep slavery. So no, we fought a war against ourselves to end slavery. Nearly 700,000 people died. A lot of poor people from the South that just, when you asked them, why are you going to war? Why are you going into this war? Well, the Yankees are down here. They didn't even know, poor people didn't even know what they were fighting for. But the politicians did, the rulers, the leaders, and they were all Democrats. They were slave traders, slave owners. KKK, Jim Crow South. Those were all Democrats, every single one of them. But we eradicated it from this country. And the rest of the world had it from the dawn of time. One tribe, war against the other tribe, enslave the other tribe, take their land. Before the Americas started, way back when, before there were even white people on this earth. And there's still slavery today. Right now, Africa has close to 7 million slaves. Probably even more than that, because Obama and Hillary took down Libya, and Gaddafi, who used to be a terrorist, but then he changed because we put on sanctions and we warned him, and he did everything we told him to do. And what he did was he was actually protecting sub-Saharan African, the black Africans in his country, because slavery was all over Africa, black Africans owning other black Africans. And then when Gaddafi was killed, thanks to Hillary and Obama, ISIS came in and put them in cages and sold them on auction blocks. In fact, I was going to do a whole very news piece. I was trying to get into a news format than this particular format, but it was so explicit, and the photographs that I had were so explicit that YouTube wouldn't allow it, so they took it down. So now I'm doing this format, and I'm just explaining it to you. I'm not going to go into too much detail and about Benghazi, but we're just on slavery right now. So thanks to our first African-American president, Libya has auction blocks and sub-Saharan Africans or black Africans in cages. Thank you very much, Hillary and Obama. So right now, you've got genocides going on. Africa is not a very nice place. If you're black, it's not a very nice place to be. You could end up dying in lots of ways and lots of diseases. And also voodoo, where if you have black parents and you really are sub-Saharan African, but you're born albino, they cut pieces off your body slowly and they boil it, because in voodoo, if you're born white and albino, that's magical, and then they make a potion out of it. So it's that's something. Never mind what happens to the girls. They get FGM when they're born and it's cut off with a sharp stone. Never mind that. See, Marianne Williamson and the Me Too movement, nobody's going over to these countries and asking anybody to apologize, because black Africans are doing it to other black Africans. There's no need to apologize because it's the same race. And of course, nobody's going to Arabia, who actually killed 200 million black Africans, because they wanted the women primarily as sex slaves. And if a child was born of that union of the Arab and the black African, the child was killed immediately. And they were actually intimidated, afraid of the African male prowess. So they wanted them as eunuchs. So what they did was they cut off, they made them eunuchs, they cut it off, and 1 out of 30 men survived. So it's probably more than this, but it's at least 200 million black Africans died by the Arab-African slave trade, or they just went and took them. And North America, wants to pay, the other thing the Democrats want, we need to pay reparations. We got 5% of the transatlantic slave trade. Well, South America, all the good people, because they're all people who are not white, though they're Caucasian, a lot of them are Caucasian, most of them are Caucasian. They're blameless because the color of their skin, they're considered not white. There's a lot of people who actually are white, a lot of Germans, a lot of Italians, but Germans are pretty white. But they got 9,500,000, 95% of the transatlantic slave trade. But Marianne Williamson, I bet if anybody from south of the border was in that church, she would not have them stand up. In fact, she would make the white people apologize to them too, even though they took 9,500,000 African slaves. Somehow, the logic of the Democrats is that they are blameless.